The road was quieterly so. Luke had driven thousands of miles across highways and back roads, but something about this stretch felt different. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like and share this video. It was late in the day, the sky tinged orange, and the sun beginning to disappear behind the thick trees lining Highway 251. The hum of his truck was the only sound, broken occasionally by the wind rustling the leaves. This sidetrack wasn't busy. In fact, Luke had barely seen another vehicle in over an hour, and that suited him just fine, until the deer appeared. It dashed out from the underbrush with the wild panic only forest animals can carry. Luke saw it at the last second. His hands reacted on instinct, jerking the steering wheel left in a desperate attempt to avoid the creature. The deer was spared. His truck was not. The massive vehicle tipped violently. For a brief second, Luke felt the tires lift from the road. Then came the crash. Metal screamed as the truck slammed onto its side, the windshield cracking into a spiderweb. The world outside turned sideways. Time slowed. When it finally stopped, Luke lay groaning in the cab, the seatbelt holding him in place. He unbuckled, crawled out through the shattered window, and stumbled onto the pavement, clutching his ribs. But what caught his eye wasn't the damage to the truck, it was what spilled out of it. The top of the cargo container had been torn open like a tin can, and its contents now littered the highway and even spilled into the grass beyond. Blue and white objects, hundreds of them, rolled across the asphalt like oversized toys. Luke blinked. He walked slowly toward them, limping, dazed. They looked like beach balls, or maybe cheap rugby balls, the kind you'd find in a supermarket bin during summer. But something was off. They were too heavy, too firm, and every single one of them was wrapped meticulously, layer after layer. Luke crouched beside one, peeling back the glossy outer layer with curiosity. But before he could go any further, headlights appeared in the distance. They weren't friendly. A black SUV approached quickly, its lights dimmed, but its presence unmistakably assertive. It stopped beside the wreck. Then another SUV arrived, then another. Within minutes, more than 10 black vehicles surrounded the crash site. Men in dark suits stepped out, all with the same cold expression, all with the same stillness in their movements. Luke stood up slowly, hands slightly raised, unsure what he was dealing with. One of them stepped forward, flashed a badge, and said only one thing: "Please step away from the truck, sir. But for your safety." They formed a perimeter, moved swiftly, spoke in hushed tones. Luke tried asking questions, but most ignored him. They didn't behave like police officers. No radios, no car numbers, no urgency, just control. Eventually, they forced him back 300 feet from his own truck. They insisted he had to leave the area, citing safety concerns. He needed to call someone to pick him up. They wouldn't allow him near the vehicle again. So Luke called his friend Stephen. When Stephen pulled up, Luke was already far from the scene, standing in a ditch beside the road, and in his hands, clutched tightly, was one of the blue and white balls. Stephen's eyes widened. "You took that from the truck?" Luke nodded. "It rolled down the hill. Nobody saw." Stephen looked back toward the guarded wreck. "You shouldn't be holding that." "I know," Luke said, "but I have to find out what it is." They drove away fast. Luke kept looking over his shoulder. No one followed, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Back at Stephen's house, the two men stared at the object on the kitchen counter. It looked harmless-like, something you'd find in a toy store. But it didn't feel harmless. It felt protected. Layer after layer of wrapping came off, each one thicker, more difficult than the last. There were no logos, no instructions, no labels. Finally, after several minutes of careful cutting, the contents revealed themselves. Luke staggered back. Stephen's jaw dropped. Inside were syringes, rows of them, alongside small vacuum-sealed bags of white pills. Everything was sterile, perfectly preserved. Stephen whispered, "You were transporting this?" Luke could barely speak. "I didn't know. They didn't let me see. I just signed the papers. We have to call the police." But Luke shook his head immediately. "No, we can't." "Why not? Those guys at the scene? They showed badges. But what if they are the police? Or worse, what if the police work for them?" Stephen stared in disbelief. "If we call anyone," Luke continued, "they'll know where we are, and I don't want anyone knocking on this door at midnight." For a long moment silence filled the kitchen. Then Luke snapped his fingers. "The paperwork. The transport form I signed it had a delivery address." Stephen narrowed his eyes. "You want to go there? If we're going to figure this out, that's our best shot." Luke pulled the folded form from his coat pocket and smoothed it out on the counter. There it was, a small warehouse address in a neighboring town. No company name, just numbers and street. That's where the truck was supposed to go. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the answers would be. They got back in the car and drove through the night, staying off major roads, avoiding checkpoints. When they passed the crash site again, it was already cleared. No sign of the truck, not even tire marks, going like it never happened. An hour later, they reached the warehouse. It stood alone at the edge of an industrial park-hand aging, concrete structure surrounded by fencing, shadowed under flickering yellow floodlights. The lot was quiet, but Luke's heart sank the moment he saw it. His truck was parked beside the loading dock. Stephen parked their car 2 streets over. The 2 men crept closer on foot, sticking to the shadows. They crouched behind a row of dumpsters, peering around the edge. The building's side door was open, and figures moved inside, men in dark suits, just like before. They were unloading the blue and white packages, stacking them onto carts, wheeling them inside. Luke raised his phone and snapped a few blurry photos. It wasn't enough. He moved closer. Stephen hissed at him to stop, but Luke ignored it. He needed to know. He needed proof. He slipped behind a low concrete barrier, no more than 30 feet from the entrance. He could hear them now, muffled voices, the screech of metal carts, the clink of something glass. He reached for his phone again. Then he stepped on a crate. The noise echoed. For a moment everything froze. Then the suits turned. Before Luke could react, 2 of them were already at his side. They grabbed him by the collar and dragged him out from the shadows. Seconds later, they had Stephen too. Neither resisted. They knew it was useless. They were marched inside the warehouse, past rows of crates, into a corner that looked more like a lab than a storage facility. Bright lights, stainless steel tables, cabinets full of vials and sealed containers. It was stark and quiet, the hum of refrigeration units the only sound. 2 chairs were set in the corner. They were shoved into them. Then silence. After a few tense minutes, a man entered. Not in a suit, in a white lab coat. He looked nothing like the others. No expression of threat. Just calm, tired eyes behind small glasses. He walked slowly, hands folded, and stopped in front of them. "Who are you?" he asked. Luke hesitated, then spoke. "My name is Luke. I'm the original driver of the truck. I didn't know what I was carrying." The man nodded once, showing no alarm. "And you?" he said, turning to Stephen. "I'm just his friend. He called me after the crash." The lab coat man remained silent for a moment, as if calculating something. Then he exhaled gently. "You're not in trouble," he said finally. "But you shouldn't be here?" Stephen, still shaking slightly, looked confused. "Then who are you?" The man offered a small smile. "My name is Dr. David Larson. I'm a chemist. I work for the Federal Medical Research Division." Luke raised his eyebrows. "Wait, your government?" Dr. Larson nodded. "Yes, officially. But what we do here is sensitive, which is why we take extreme precautions." He gestured toward one of the nearby packages. "What you saw? What spilled from your truck? Those weren't toys. They weren't explosives. They're chemical transport shells, designed to be unassuming, sealed, and protected against impact. Inside those shells are rare pharmaceutical compounds ingredients for advanced medical research. Most aren't even approved yet. They're priceless and very vulnerable to theft." Luke leaned forward. "So why hide them like that? Why not just label them?" The doctor gave him a knowing look. "Because people steal what they recognize. Nobody bothers with beach balls." Stephen crossed his arm. "Then why didn't you just tell Luke? He was the driver." Dr. Larson's face grew serious. "Because every extra person who knows is another risk. Even our drivers aren't told. It's safer that way, for everyone." Luke looked down at his hands. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just didn't understand." The chemist paused again, then spoke gently. "We understand, which is why I'm making you an offer." Both men looked up. "You've already seen more than 99% of our drivers ever will, and you handled it with caution, not exploitation. We can use people like that." He pulled a small file folder from a drawer and placed it on the table. "Luke, if you're interested, we'd like to contract you directly. You'd be transporting high-value, government-protected shipments across the country. Regular pay, extra security, but full secrecy." Luke blinked. "You want to hire me?" "Yes. We'll take care of your truck maintenance. Give you a new identity number for routing, and no more mystery. You'll know what you're carrying. Not the formula, but the stakes." "And me?" Stephen asked, a bit hopeful. Dr. Larson smiled. "You've seen too much. You're in it now. But if you agree to stay quiet, we can ensure you never have to worry." The two friends looked at each other. It wasn't what they expected, but somehow it felt right. Luke nodded. "I'm in," Stephen added quickly. "Me too." The doctor extended a hand to shake.